Hello there. I'm Jonathan Kirkwood, one of your peers in this course. My paper focuses on my current workplace, the Sloan Museum of Discovery, and its in-house archives, the Perry Archives, and the fistful of descriptions I have encountered since I started working there nearly 3 months ago. The Perry Archives is one element of the collections department at the Sloan Museum. It contains 1,200 linear feet of automotive records from General Motors, 800 linear feet of historical manuscripts, some of which go back to the antebellum period. It also holds the Flint Journal Archives, which is composed of newspaper clippings going back to the 1950s, sometimes the 40s, other clippings going back earlier that are on microfiche, and whole issues of the paper going back from 2015 to the 1870s on microfilm. The archives also holds a 35,000 image collection of sites and people from Flint and Genesee County, as well as various factories operated by General Motors in the area. There is a 3,000 film reel collection from WJRT TV 12, now ABC 12, that stretches from the 1950s up to 1980. And then there is a raft of unprocessed and undescribed collections I've yet to get into. So there are some problems at the Perry Archives. Most notably are the cramped conditions. The archives shares storage space with museum artifacts, and that has resulted in both being crammed into random corners, and I'm still trying to track down where all those corners are. The building itself is an older building. I believe it was erected in the 1910s and the 1920s, so it is around 100 years old. The budget situation right now is rather tight, as it is everywhere, which has resulted in insufficient preservation supplies for the time being, so I have to be selective about where I apply them. Because the building is so old, pests are a continuing threat, and environmental controls are lacking, though we do have a separate HVAC for the collection space, but even that is not in the best condition. I myself am the first actual archivist to have been hired by the museum to tend the archives. And among other problems is description, or rather the lack of proper description. Past curatorial practice going back several decades, from what I have observed and heard, has described archival records and museum artifacts as the same. What this means is excessive item-level description of archival records. Coupled with this is a lack of finding aids for most collections except the most recent accessions from the past decade. Past Perfect, while offering a module for cataloging archival records, has been used as a vehicle for item-level description, probably because if you look at the archives module, you'll see object ID instead of collection ID. The excess of item-level description and reliance on institutional memory and turnover have led to inconsistent description, and that includes metadata too. Then there are the few finding aids in use. There are two formats, a short one and a long one. These problems are in no way unique. Others have noted problems between archival records and museum artifacts when it comes to description. Gerald Beasley, for example, deduced it to archives and libraries imposing systems of control on their materials and museums building programs around their materials. Michael Jones used field books at his museum as an example, writing that he has trouble describing them since they are technically not artifacts. They sit at that boundary between museums and museums and archives. Eric Ketelaar stepped into theory by warning about subjectivity popping up in use of archival records. These are a few of the sources I called upon for the literature review. Now, the Sloan Museum refers, and really does refer, to the Perry Archives as a hidden gem, and that's quite correct. Because of the number of problems with description, that makes it a hidden gem. Reliance on institutional memory meant that practices went undocumented, and nor were they consistent. This affected the details of cataloging, which itself remains inconsistent throughout. And of course, focused heavily on the item level. There was at one time a card catalog, which we still have but no longer reference that much, but that was originally designed for artifacts. Eventually, archival records worked their way in there, but they were also described at the item level. Complicating matters further, some archival collections saw partial description. What this means is that only a portion of the documents in them were described. This goes back to Ketelaar's argument about subjectivity affecting archival records. Are some more important than others? Should they receive greater visibility? Should it be the archivist who takes on that role, or should it be the duty of the researcher to decide what is more important? Now, when it comes down to this excessive item level description, the Durant Motor Company collection exemplifies this the most from what I have observed thus far. The original processor took to writing object IDs on virtually every document and photograph in the collection. I do consider this to be vandalism of archival records, but that was the practice at the time. Now, for example, one document is labeled in pencil 2011.53.1746. To translate, 2011 is when the collection was accessioned, the year of 2011. 53 for it being the 53rd accession of the year, and 1746 means that the document is the 1,746th item in the collection. Now, fortunately, no document from this collection was ever described in past perfect, but this alone shows the pitfalls of item level description of archival records. Another problem lies in the finding aids. These were a resolution implemented by a research assistant who doubled as the archivist, though she was only part-time. The problem here is that there are two types of finding aids involved. A longer one that provides for metadata and file level description, and a shorter one that deals with just high-level collection information and is, from best I can understand, available for quick reference by archivists and researchers. But this does mean that information on both must match. Past Perfect has been much of a problem as well. Part of this has to do with it having been designed for objects instead of documents arranged into a hierarchy. And here again, item level description reigns supreme. But I have some ideas to begin resolving these issues. For one, I wish to move away from Microsoft Word-based finding aids. Past Perfect can be used for file level description through the Location tab. This would help minimize item level description. Better use of metadata is another need. And lastly, one standard for description. No more fistfuls of descriptions. These attempts, I believe, would take the Perry Archives from a hidden gem to a shining star and a far more valuable archives for the museum in Flint and Genesee County. Thank you very much for your time.